I never imagined that at 52 years old, I'd have to defend my ability to take care of myself to my own neighbors. It started when Mrs. Patterson from down the street gave me that pitying look while I was getting my mail, asking if I was managing okay on my own these days. Then my book club friends began offering to drive me everywhere, even though I've been driving perfectly fine for over 30 years. The final straw came when my pharmacist handed me a pamphlet about senior living communities, saying someone had mentioned I might need additional support. You're about to hear an unbelievable true story, so please like and subscribe. Drop your location in the comments. My name is Katherine Gibson. I'm 52 years old, and I've been living independently in the same house for 15 years. I work full-time as a graphic designer, maintain my own garden, and until recently, nobody questioned my ability to handle my daily life. But suddenly, everyone in my small town seemed to think I was some helpless woman who couldn't function without constant supervision. The mystery deepened when I ran into my daughter Emma at the grocery store. Emma Gibson Martinez is 28, married with 2 kids of her own, and she looked genuinely surprised when I mentioned all the concerned looks and offers of help I'd been receiving. "Mom, that's so weird," Emma said, loading organic vegetables into her cart. "Why would people think you need help? You're literally the most independent person I know. You fixed your own washing machine last month and taught me how to file my taxes." That evening, I called my best friend, Janet Walsh. Janet and I have been friends since college, and she's always been my voice of reason during family drama. She works as a nurse at the local hospital, so she hears all the town gossip. "Katherine, I've been wondering when you'd bring this up," Janet said carefully. "I've heard the rumors too, but I wasn't sure how to tell you. People are saying you can't take care of yourself, that you're having memory issues, that you can't manage basic tasks anymore." My heart sank. But that's completely untrue. Who would spread something like that? "That's the thing." Janet hesitated. "The information seems to be coming from someone close to you. Someone people would trust about your personal situation." I spent the next few days trying to piece together the source of these rumors. I made a list of everyone who knew intimate details about my life, everyone who had access to information about my daily routines. The circle was surprisingly small. Then I remembered something that made my stomach drop. 3 weeks ago, my son Marcus had stopped by unexpectedly while I was dealing with a particularly frustrating day. I'd been trying to program my new smart TV, my printer had jammed, and I was on hold with my insurance company about a billing error. When Marcus Gibson walked in, I was surrounded by instruction manuals and paperwork, probably looking more frazzled than usual. Marcus is 30 years old, my eldest child, and he's always been protective of his family. Sometimes too protective. He lives about 20 minutes away and works in real estate, which means he knows half the people in our town through business connections. "Mom, you look overwhelmed," he had said that day. "Are you sure you're managing everything okay? Maybe I should check on you more often." I had laughed it off at the time, telling him I was just having one of those days where technology seemed determined to make my life difficult. But now, thinking back on his concerned expression and the way he kept asking if I needed help with basic things, a horrible suspicion began forming in my mind. I decided to test my theory. I called Marcus and casually mentioned that I'd been getting offers of help from neighbors lately. "Well, that's good, Mom," he said immediately. "I mean, it's important to have support systems in place. I worry about you living alone, trying to handle everything by yourself. Maybe you should accept some of that help." "Marcus, I don't need help. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." "I know you think that, but sometimes we don't realize when we're struggling. Like that day I came over, and you couldn't figure out the TV, and all those bills were scattered everywhere. It's nothing to be ashamed of." My blood ran cold. That wasn't what had happened at all. I wasn't struggling with bills. I was organizing them. I wasn't confused about the TV. I was learning new features. But somehow, in Marcus's mind, that ordinary moment had become evidence that I was declining. "Have you mentioned your concerns to anyone else?" I asked carefully. "Just a few people who care about you. Tom Bradley asked how you were doing when I showed him the Morrison house last week. And when I was at the pharmacy picking up Emma's prescription, I mentioned to Dave that I was worried about you managing your medications correctly." I felt betrayed and embarrassed. My own son had been painting a picture of me as an incompetent woman who couldn't handle basic life tasks, and he genuinely seemed to believe he was helping me. That weekend, Emma came over for our usual Sunday dinner. I decided to be honest with her about what I'd discovered. "Your brother has been telling people I can't take care of myself," I said as we prepared salad together. "He's genuinely worried, but he's created this narrative that isn't based in reality." Emma stopped chopping cucumbers and stared at me. "Are you serious? Marcus is the reason everyone thinks you're struggling?" "I think so. And the worst part is, he believes he's being a good son by checking on me and sharing his concerns with others. But he's created a reputation problem that's affecting how people interact with me." We talked for 2 hours about family dynamics, about how Marcus had always been the family worrier, about how his protective instincts sometimes crossed boundaries. Emma agreed to help me figure out how to address this situation without damaging my relationship with my son. The next morning, Janet came over with coffee and her straightforward perspective on the situation. "So your son thinks he's helping you by telling half the town you're losing your independence?" she asked. "Catherine, this isn't just embarrassing for you. If these rumors continue, they could affect your job, your social relationships, even your ability to make your own medical and financial decisions." That's when I realized how serious this had become. Marcus's well-intentioned concern was creating a false narrative about my competence, and I needed to stop it before it spiraled further out of control. And that's when the pattern snapped into place. The discovery came 3 days later when I was cleaning out my desk drawer, looking for my insurance cards. Tucked behind some old photos, I found a printed email that must have fallen out of one of Marcus's folders during his last visit. The subject line made my stomach drop. "Regarding your mother's care needs, Marcus Mitchell." It was addressed to someone I didn't recognize, but the content was devastating. Marcus had written a detailed account of what he perceived as my declining abilities, mentioning specific incidents that he'd either misinterpreted or completely fabricated. He described me as increasingly forgetful and struggling with basic household management. Worst of all, he'd ended the email by saying he was exploring care options for me. My hands were shaking as I read it. This wasn't just casual conversation with neighbors anymore. Marcus was actively building a case for my incompetence with people I didn't even know. I called Emma immediately. "You need to see this," I said when she arrived 20 minutes later. "It's worse than we thought." Emma read the email twice, her expression growing more serious with each line. "Mom, this is really bad. He's not just worried about you, he's actively planning to make decisions for you, and he's documenting everything to justify it." "I don't understand how he got to this point," I said, feeling exhausted. "When did helping me occasionally turn into this level of control?" Emma set the paper down and looked at me directly. "It started after Dad died. Marcus appointed himself as your protector, but somewhere along the way, that became your decision maker. He genuinely believes he knows what's best for you better than you do. That evening, Marcus stopped by unannounced, as had become his habit. This time, instead of accepting his intrusion gracefully, I confronted him. "We need to talk," I said, leading him to the kitchen table where the printed emails sat waiting. His face went pale when he saw it. "Where did you get that?" "It fell out of one of your folders." "Marcus, who are these people you're writing to about my personal business?" He sat down heavily, running his hands through his hair. "Mom, I'm trying to help you. I've been researching assisted living facilities and care coordinators. I wanted to have options ready when you need them." "When I need them, or when you decide I need them?" I asked. "Because according to this email, you've already decided I can't take care of myself." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "But you can't, Mom. Not completely. You've been struggling, and someone needs to plan ahead for your safety." The gap between his perception and my reality felt enormous. "Marcus, I want you to tell me specific examples of when I've been unsafe or unable to care for myself. Not moments when I needed help or was learning something new. Actual incompetence." He was quiet for a long moment. "Well, there was that day with the bills scattered everywhere. I was organizing them by due date. That's responsible management, not confusion. And you couldn't figure out how to use the TV. I was learning the new streaming features you'd set up. That's called adapting to technology, not declining mental capacity." I watched his face as he processed this. For the first time, I saw doubt creep into his expression. "But you seem so overwhelmed sometimes," he said quietly. "And you're getting older, and I just worry that something will happen and I won't be there to help." This was the heart of it. Marcus wasn't trying to control me out of malice. He was terrified of losing me the way we'd lost his father. His concern had grown into a narrative that justified increasing intervention in my life. "Honey, I understand you're scared," I said, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "But your fear is creating problems that don't actually exist. And it's affecting my relationships and my reputation in ways that could genuinely harm my independence." Emma arrived for our planned family meeting, just as Marcus was processing this conversation. She hugged her brother, but didn't hide her frustration. "Marcus, Mom showed me the email," she said. "You can't make unilateral decisions about her life based on your anxiety about her aging." "I'm not making decisions," he protested. "I'm just preparing for possibilities." "By telling people she's incompetent when she's not," Emma replied. "By creating a paper trail that could be used against her later. By researching care facilities she doesn't need." The three of us sat in my kitchen, the weight of this family crisis settling around us. Marcus looked genuinely shaken as he began to understand how his actions had affected me. "I never meant to hurt you, Mom," he said finally. "I thought I was being responsible." "I know you did," I replied. "But now we need to figure out how to fix this. Because the damage is real, even if your intentions were good." Just as we were beginning to make progress, Janet knocked on the door. One look at her face told me she had news that would complicate everything. "Catherine," she said, glancing at Marcus and Emma, "I need to tell you something important. I just found out who Marcus has been talking to about your situation, and it's not just neighbors." My stomach dropped as Janet's words hung in the air. Marcus had gone pale, and Emma was looking between all of us with growing alarm. "What do you mean, not just neighbors?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. Janet glanced at Marcus before continuing. "I ran into Dr. Patterson at the pharmacy yesterday. He mentioned that Marcus had called him about your mental state and asked about signs of cognitive decline to watch for." The silence in my kitchen was deafening. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Dr. Patterson had been my physician for 15 years. He knew my medical history, had access to my records, and now he had Marcus's version of my supposed incompetence on file. Marcus, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Tell me you didn't. He couldn't meet my eyes. I was just asking hypothetical questions about aging and what warning signs to look for. I never said you had dementia or anything like that. But you called my doctor behind my back and discussed my mental capacity? I said, feeling the full weight of this betrayal settling over me. Do you understand what you've done? Emma was staring at her brother in disbelief. Marcus, that could go in Mom's medical file. It could affect her insurance, her ability to make her own medical decisions. How could you not think about the consequences? I panicked, okay? Marcus's voice cracked. After Dad died so suddenly, I keep imagining all the ways I could lose Mom too. I thought if I talked to her doctor, maybe I could prevent something terrible from happening. Janet reached over and squeezed my hand. There's more, Catherine. He also spoke with someone at the senior center about their programs for people with early memory issues. I closed my eyes, trying to process the full scope of what Marcus had done. It wasn't just casual conversations with neighbors anymore. He had involved medical professionals and community organizations, creating an official record of concerns about my mental fitness. The senior center? Emma asked. Mom, you volunteer there twice a week. Everyone knows you're completely competent. That's actually what saved the situation, Janet said. When Marcus called them, the coordinator was confused because she works with you regularly and said you're one of their most reliable volunteers. She told him there must be some misunderstanding. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and been so proud of, and saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in months. His anxiety about losing me had transformed him into someone who was actively undermining my autonomy and reputation. Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said. Your grief and fear about losing me the way we lost your father has made you see problems that don't exist. But in trying to protect me from imaginary issues, you've created real ones. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant for it to go this far. I just kept thinking about Dad collapsing at work, how we had no warning, and I convinced myself that if I watched you closely enough, I could prevent something like that from happening again. Emma moved her chair closer to her brother. Marcus, Dad had a massive heart attack. There were no warning signs because there was nothing to warn us about. And Mom isn't Dad. She's healthy and sharp and taking good care of herself. But what if I missed something important? Marcus asked. What if something happens and I could have prevented it? Janet spoke up quietly. Marcus, honey, you can't control life and death, and you can't protect your mother by taking away her dignity and independence. That's not protection. That's harm. I watched my son wrestle with this truth. The grief he'd never fully processed after his father's death had twisted his love for me into something controlling and destructive. But seeing it clearly now, he looked horrified by what he'd done. I need you to call Dr. Patterson, I said firmly. I need you to explain that your concerns were based on your own anxiety, not on any actual observations of cognitive decline. I need you to call the senior center and clarify the same thing. I will, he said immediately. I'll call them both first thing in the morning. And the neighbors you've spoken with, Emma added. You need to set the record straight there too. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes. I'll talk to everyone. I'll explain that I was wrong, that I let my fears get the best of me. Janet cleared her throat. There's one more thing, Catherine, and this one might be more complicated to fix. My heart sank further. How much more damage could there be? What is it? I asked. Marcus also contacted Adult Protective Services. The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees buckle, and I had to grip the edge of the kitchen table to steady myself. "Adult Protective Services?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Marcus, what have you done?" The color drained completely from his face. "Mom, I was so worried about you, and when Dr. Patterson didn't seem to take my concerns seriously, I thought maybe they could do a wellness check or something. I never imagined they would what, Marcus?" Emma's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Did you think they'd just pop by for tea? Do you have any idea what you've set in motion?" Janet reached over and placed her hand on my arm. "Catherine, breathe. We'll figure this out." But I couldn't breathe. The full scope of what my son had done was crashing over me in waves. "Marcus, Adult Protective Services investigates elder abuse and neglect. They have the power to remove people from their homes. They can declare someone incompetent." "I didn't know that," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought they were like social workers who just checked on people." "When did you call them?" I demanded, my voice stronger now, fueled by a mixture of terror and fury I'd never felt toward my own child. "Last week," he admitted, looking down at his hands. "They said someone would be in touch within 10 business days to schedule an assessment." Emma stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "Marcus, do you understand what you've done? Do you know how these investigations work? They're going to come here looking for evidence that Mom can't care for herself, and they're going to find a perfectly competent woman living independently." "But that's good, right?" Marcus asked desperately. "If they see she's fine, then it's over?" Janet shook her head grimly. "It's not that simple, Marcus. Once a report is filed, it becomes part of Catherine's record. Future healthcare decisions, insurance, housing applications, this could follow her for years." I sank into my chair, the full weight of the situation pressing down on me. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. What you've done isn't just embarrassing or inconvenient. You've potentially compromised my legal autonomy. If they determine that there are concerns, even unfounded ones, it could affect my ability to make my own medical decisions, my housing options, everything." He was sobbing now, his whole body shaking. "I never meant for any of this. I was just scared, Mom. After Dad died so suddenly, I kept thinking about losing you too, and I convinced myself that if I wasn't watching constantly, something terrible would happen." Emma stopped pacing and knelt beside her brother's chair. "Marcus, I get it. We were all devastated when Dad died. But what you've done isn't protecting Mom. It's attacking her independence and dignity." "I know that now," he choked out. "But how do I fix it? How do I undo what I've done?" Janet leaned forward. "Can you call them back and withdraw the complaint?" Marcus wiped his eyes. "I tried calling yesterday after I started realizing how wrong I was, but they said once a report is filed, the investigation has to proceed. The caseworker assigned to it has to make the determination." The kitchen fell silent, except for Marcus's quiet crying. I stared out the window at my garden, thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. Even if the investigator concluded I was fine, the report would exist. Future doctors might treat me differently. If I ever needed care or wanted to move to a senior community, this could complicate everything. "What exactly did you tell them?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. Marcus took a shaky breath. "I told them you were showing signs of memory loss, that you were neglecting your health, that you weren't eating properly or keeping up with household maintenance. I said I was worried about your safety living alone." Emma's head dropped into her hands. "Oh, Marcus." "I told them you were defensive when I tried to help, and that you were isolating yourself from family. he continued, each word making me feel sicker. I said I thought you might be in denial about your declining abilities. All lies, I said quietly. Every single word of that was a lie. Not lies exactly, Marcus protested weakly. I really believed those things at the time. Janet's voice was firm, but not unkind. Marcus, believing something doesn't make it true. You created a narrative in your head based on your own fears, not on reality. I stood up slowly, my mind starting to work through the implications. When they come to investigate, they're going to be looking for evidence of everything you reported. They'll examine my home, my finances, my medical records. They'll interview my neighbors, my doctor, people at the senior center. The same people Marcus has already spoken to, Emma added grimly. The ones he's already planted doubts with about your competency. The full scope of the problem was becoming clear. It wasn't just that Marcus had filed a false report. He'd spent weeks laying groundwork that could now be interpreted as evidence supporting his claims. Marcus, I said, turning to face him directly. I need you to write down everything you remember telling Adult Protective Services. Every detail, every claim, every concern you reported. And then, I need you to write down every person you've spoken to about me, and exactly what you said to each of them. Why? He asked. Because when that investigator shows up at my door, I need to be prepared to address every single false claim systematically. And we need to figure out how to demonstrate that your reports came from your own anxiety, not from observed reality. Emma nodded approvingly. That's smart, Mom. We need to get ahead of this. Janet squeezed my hand. And I can help document your actual daily routine and capabilities. Show a clear picture of your real life versus Marcus's distorted version. Marcus looked up hopefully. Does that mean you think we can fix this? I looked at my son, this man whose love for me had become so twisted by grief and fear that he'd created a nightmare for both of us. I don't know, Marcus. But I do know that sitting here feeling sorry for ourselves isn't going to solve anything. The phone rang suddenly, cutting through our conversation. We all froze, staring at it as it continued to ring. What if that's them? Marcus whispered. I took a deep breath and walked to the phone. There's only one way to find out. I picked up the receiver. Hello? Mom? It's Emma. I blinked, confused. Emma, you're sitting right here. What? Emma looked equally puzzled, then understanding dawned on her face. Oh, Mom, that's my cell phone ringing, not your landline. The relief in the room was palpable as Emma answered her phone. Hello? Oh, hi. Yes, I'm at my mother's house right now. No, tonight won't work for dinner. Family emergency. While Emma finished her call, I sat back down, my heart still racing from the false alarm. Marcus was hunched forward, his head in his hands. Marcus, I said gently, we need those lists. Can you start with what you told Adult Protective Services? Try to remember their exact questions and your exact answers. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. They asked if I had specific concerns about your ability to live independently. I said yes. They asked for examples. What examples did you give them? Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. I told them you seemed confused when I called, that you forgot our conversations. I said your house looked different, less organized than usual. But Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice level. I wasn't confused. I was upset because you kept asking the same questions over and over. And my house looked different because I'd been redecorating, remember? I showed you the new curtains I'd bought. I thought you were making excuses, he admitted. I was so convinced something was wrong that I interpreted everything as a symptom. Emma finished her call and rejoined us. What else did you tell them, Marcus? They asked about your social connections. I said you'd stopped seeing friends and family regularly. Janet shook her head. That's not true either. You've been at book club twice this month, we had lunch last week, and you volunteer at the library every Tuesday. But you weren't seeing me as much, Marcus said defensively. You used to call me every few days, and suddenly it was once a week. Because you kept asking me the same worried questions every time we talked, I said, my frustration finally showing. Every conversation became an interrogation about whether I was eating properly, sleeping well, managing my medications. It was exhausting, Marcus. So yes, I started spacing out our calls because I needed a break from being treated like I was incompetent. Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. I was just trying to take care of you. I know, I said more softly. But there's a difference between caring for someone and micromanaging their life because of your own anxiety. Emma leaned forward. Marcus, what else did you tell them? We need the complete picture. They asked about financial concerns. I told them I didn't know if you were managing your bills properly because you wouldn't let me help with them. Because I don't need help with them, I said firmly. My bills are paid automatically, I balance my checkbook every month, and my financial advisor says I'm in excellent shape for retirement. You wanting to take over my finances wasn't about me needing help. It was about you needing to feel in control. Janet nodded. And that's probably going to work in your favor when they investigate. Your bank records will show consistent, responsible financial management. What about medical concerns? Emma asked. Did you mention anything about Mom's health? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. I told them you seemed to be losing weight and that I was worried you weren't eating properly. I lost 8 pounds intentionally, I said. My doctor and I discussed it at my last physical. I've been walking more and eating more vegetables. It's the healthiest I've been in years. But you look so thin, Marcus said weakly. I look healthy, I corrected. You look at me and see decline because that's what you're afraid of seeing. Emma, when you look at me, what do you see? Emma studied me carefully. I see someone who's more active and energetic than she was 6 months ago. Your color is better, you move more easily, and honestly, you seem happier than you've been since Dad died. I am happier, I admitted. I finally started to feel like myself again, instead of just a widow trying to figure out how to live alone. But Marcus, your constant worry and checking up on me was making me doubt myself. I started to wonder if maybe I was declining and just couldn't see it. Janet squeezed my hand. That's called gaslighting, even when it's unintentional. When someone keeps telling you there's something wrong with you, you start to believe it. Marcus looked stricken. I didn't mean to do that. I really thought I was helping. I know you did, I said. But the impact was that you were undermining my confidence and independence. And now, you've involved the state in our family problems. Emma pulled out a notebook. Let's make a systematic plan. Marcus, I want you to write down every single thing you told Adult Protective Services. Then we'll go through each claim and document the reality. Mom, do you have copies of recent medical records, bank statements, and bills? Everything's in my filing cabinet, I said. I keep meticulous records. Good. Janet, can you help Mom organize a clear picture of her typical week? Her activities, responsibilities, social connections? Janet nodded. We can create a detailed log showing her actual daily life versus Marcus's perception of it. Marcus looked up from the notebook Emma had handed him. Do you really think this will work? What if they don't believe us? What if they think I was right to be concerned? Marcus, I said firmly, the truth has a weight to it. When they see my actual life, my organized home, my financial records, my medical reports, my activity schedule, it will be obvious that your concerns were based on anxiety, not reality. But what about all the people I talked to? Marcus asked miserably. What if they back up what I said? Emma looked up from her own note-taking. That's actually going to help us too, Marcus, because if we can show a pattern of you expressing the same unfounded worries to multiple people, it demonstrates that this was about your mental state, not Mom's. The phone rang again, and this time, we all froze completely. It was definitely my landline. That could be them, Marcus whispered, his face pale. I stood up slowly. If it is, then we deal with it. But we deal with it together, and we deal with it honestly. As I reached for the phone, I realized something had shifted inside me. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something stronger. A quiet confidence in my own truth and the support of the people who really knew me. The phone rang a third time, insistent and demanding an answer. I picked up the phone on the fourth ring, my heart hammering against my ribs. Hello? Mom, it's me. Marcus's voice came through the receiver, and I looked at him in confusion. He was sitting right there at my kitchen table, staring back at me with equal bewilderment. Marcus, you're sitting right here. What are you talking about? There was a pause. Mom, I'm calling from my car. I'm on my way over to check on you. Are you okay? You sound confused. I looked at the Marcus sitting at my table, who had gone completely white. He shook his head frantically and whispered, That's not me. My mind raced for a moment before the obvious explanation hit me. I'm sorry, you must have the wrong number. There's no one here by that name. Mom, it's Marcus, your son. I'm worried about you. You've been having these episodes where you forget things, and yesterday you left the stove on again. The blood drained from my face. This wasn't a wrong number. Someone was deliberately calling me, pretending to be my son, feeding me the exact same lies that Marcus had been spreading. I hung up the phone and turned to face the three of them. Marcus looked like he might be sick. Someone just called pretending to be you, I said to Marcus, my voice shaking. They knew about the stove story you've been telling people. They knew details. Emma stood up abruptly. This changes everything. Someone is actively trying to mess with your head, Mom. This isn't just about Marcus's anxiety anymore. But who would do that? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Who would I have told those stories to? Who would use them like that? Janet had been quiet, but now she spoke up with a grim expression. Marcus, I need you to think very carefully. Have you talked about your mother's supposed problems with anyone who might have their own reasons for wanting her to seem incompetent? What do you mean? Marcus asked, but I could see understanding dawning in his eyes. I mean, Janet continued, is there anyone who might benefit if your mother were declared unable to care for herself? Anyone who might gain something from her being seen as declining? The kitchen fell silent except for the tick of the wall clock. I thought about my house, my savings account, my independence. I thought about the systematic way the caller had used Marcus's exact words, the confidence in their voice when they claimed to be my son. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Oh God, I think I know who it might be. Emma leaned forward. Who, Marcus? Who did you talk to about Mom? But before Marcus could answer, we heard footsteps on my front porch and a firm knock at the door. Through the window, I could see a woman in a dark suit with a clipboard, and behind her stood a man in khakis and a polo shirt. Adult Protective Services, came a clear, professional voice from outside. We're here to conduct a welfare check." The four of us looked at each other, the phone call suddenly taking on a much more sinister meaning. Someone hadn't just been trying to confuse me. They had been setting the stage, making sure I seemed disoriented and unreliable right before the official visit. The knock came again, more insistent this time. My mind raced as the knocking continued. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had orchestrated this perfectly. The phone call to rattle me, followed immediately by an official visit that would find me looking confused and surrounded by family members clearly concerned about my well-being. "Don't answer it yet," I whispered, surprised by how calm my voice sounded despite the panic clawing at my chest. For weeks, I'd been doubting myself, wondering if I really was losing my grip on reality. But this moment crystallized everything with startling clarity. I wasn't losing my mind. I was being deliberately undermined. Emma moved closer to me. "Mom, you don't have to talk to them if you don't want to." "Actually, I do want to talk to them," I said, straightening my shoulders. "But first, Marcus, you need to tell us who you've been discussing my supposed problems with." Marcus looked physically ill. His hands were shaking as he ran them through his hair. "I talked to Diane from your book club. She called me a few weeks ago saying she was worried about you, that you'd seemed confused at the last meeting. So I told her about my concerns. About the stove, about you forgetting things." The pieces clicked into place with sickening precision. Diane, who had always been competitive about everything, whose house was bigger, whose children were more successful, whose retirement was more comfortable. Diane, who had made pointed comments about my house being too much for someone my age and how smart people downsize before they have to. "She's been calling you pretending to be me," Marcus said, the realization hitting him fully. "She's been using what I told her to make you think you're going crazy." Janet moved toward the window, peering through the curtains. "And now she's called Adult Protective Services, probably told them she's concerned about an elderly neighbor who's declining rapidly. After that phone call, you probably do seem disoriented." The knocking stopped, but I could hear voices on the porch. They weren't leaving. They were probably discussing their approach, maybe calling for backup or a supervisor. I felt a strange sense of liberation wash over me. For weeks, I'd been questioning every decision, second-guessing every memory, wondering if my own son was right to worry about my competence. But I wasn't incompetent. I was being systematically manipulated by someone who saw opportunity in my son's genuine but misguided anxiety. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, moving toward the door. "We're going to invite them in. I'm going to calmly explain what's been happening. And Marcus, you're going to tell them exactly what you told Diane and when." "Mom, are you sure about this?" Emma asked. "Maybe we should call a lawyer first." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not hiding or running from this. I know who I am. I know I'm competent to live in my own home and make my own decisions. And I'm not going to let Diane or anyone else take that away from me." I reached for the door handle, then paused. The woman I'd been a month ago would have been terrified to face the situation. She would have deferred to Marcus's judgment, assumed the authorities knew best, maybe even wondered if everyone else was right about her declining abilities. But that woman had been operating from a place of manufactured doubt. This woman, the real me, knew better. I opened the door to find the social worker and her colleague examining something on a clipboard. When they looked up, I met their eyes directly. "Good afternoon," I said. "I understand you're here about concerns regarding my welfare. I'd like to invite you in, and I think you'll find this situation is quite different from whatever you were told." The woman in the suit looked surprised by my directness. "Mrs. Patterson, we received a report from a concerned community member about your well-being. Are these your family members?" Yes, this is my son Marcus, my daughter Emma, and my friend Janet. We were just discussing the fact that someone has been impersonating my son on the phone, using private family information to try to convince me I'm mentally declining. The social worker's eyebrows rose slightly. Behind her, the man with the clipboard had stopped writing and was looking at me with new attention. That's quite an accusation, the woman said carefully. Perhaps we could sit down and discuss this properly. As they entered my living room, I caught Marcus's eye. He still looked shaken, but there was something else there now, a kind of respect I hadn't seen from him in weeks. Emma squeezed my hand as we sat down, and Janet positioned herself where she could take notes. I was ready to fight for my life, my home, and my independence. But first, I had some very specific questions about exactly what Diane had told these people, and when she had called them. The social worker opened her folder, and I saw several pages of handwritten notes. This wasn't a simple welfare check. Someone had been building a case against me for quite some time. Now then, the woman began, we understand there have been incidents with kitchen appliances left on, confusion about family members, and memory issues. Can you tell us about that? I smiled, feeling more like myself than I had in weeks. Actually, I think there are some things you need to know first about who gave you that information and why. I looked directly at the social worker, keeping my voice steady and clear. Before we discuss any alleged incidents, I need to know exactly who contacted you and what they said, because I believe someone has been deliberately creating false situations to make me appear incompetent. The social worker glanced at her colleague, then back at her notes. We received multiple calls over the past 2 weeks from someone identifying herself as Diane Morrison. She claimed to be a concerned neighbor who had witnessed several troubling incidents. What kind of incidents? Emma asked, leaning forward. Kitchen fires, confusion about family members, wandering behavior. The social worker looked uncomfortable. She also said your mother had been calling her son Marcus repeatedly, not recognizing his voice. Marcus sat up straighter. That's impossible. I haven't given anyone permission to speak for me, and I certainly haven't been getting confused calls from my mother. Actually, I said, I have been getting calls from someone claiming to be Marcus, but it wasn't Marcus. Someone has been calling me, using information about our family to convince me I was losing my memory. They knew things only someone close to us would know. The social worker exchanged glances with her colleague. Mrs. Patterson, these are very serious allegations. Are you suggesting someone has been impersonating your son? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. I turned to Marcus. Tell them about the call you just received. Marcus cleared his throat. Well, I got a call about an hour ago from someone claiming to be representing my mother's interests. They suggested she needed immediate intervention and that I should support whatever decisions were being made for her safety. When I questioned it, they knew details about our family that seemed to confirm they were legitimate. Janet had been taking notes throughout the conversation. It sounds like someone has been working both sides, calling Mrs. Patterson to convince her she's declining, and calling her family to build support for intervention. The social worker was writing rapidly now. Mrs. Morrison also provided specific dates and times for these alleged incidents. She seemed very knowledgeable about your routine, Mrs. Patterson. Because she's been watching me, I said. Diane Morrison lives across the street. She's made it clear she disapproves of my independence, and she's apparently decided to do something about it. Emma reached over and took my hand. Mom, why didn't you tell us about the phone calls sooner? I felt a familiar pang of guilt, then pushed it away. Because they were very convincing, sweetheart. The person calling knew things about you, about Marcus, about our family history. They would call and say things like, remember when we talked about your medication yesterday? And when I couldn't remember the conversation, they'd act concerned about my memory. That's psychological manipulation, Marcus said, his voice tight with anger. They were gaslighting you. The social worker looked troubled. Mrs. Patterson, do you have any proof of these calls? My phone should have a record of the incoming numbers, I said. And I imagine if you check with the phone company, you might find that the calls claiming to be from Marcus to various agencies didn't actually come from his phone. The second social worker spoke up for the first time. We'll definitely need to investigate this further. But Mrs. Patterson, we still need to address the welfare concerns that were reported. Can you walk us through your daily routine? For the next 20 minutes, I detailed my activities, showed them my medication organizer, my meal planning calendar, my exercise schedule. Emma and Marcus added their observations about my capabilities, and Janet provided the perspective of someone who spent regular time with me. Mom, Emma said quietly during a pause. I owe you an apology. When Marcus called me worried about you, I should have come to talk to you directly, instead of just worrying from a distance. Marcus nodded, looking ashamed. We both should have. We let someone else's narrative about your well-being override what we could see with our own eyes. The social worker was closing her folder when her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked up with a strange expression. Mrs. Patterson, we just received another call about you. From someone claiming to be your daughter Emma, saying the family was concerned about your behavior today and requesting immediate assistance. Emma's face went white. I never made that call. I've been here with my mother for the past 2 hours. The social worker looked at her colleague, then back at us. I think we need to take your allegations about impersonation very seriously. This situation appears to be far more complex than a simple welfare check. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Someone was actively making calls while we sat here together, continuing their campaign to paint me as incompetent. Can you trace where that call came from? Marcus asked, his protective instincts fully engaged now. The social worker nodded grimly. We'll work with law enforcement if necessary. This appears to be harassment using our services as a weapon. She looked at me with new respect. Mrs. Patterson, I apologize. It's clear you're dealing with something far more serious than confusion or family miscommunication. Emma was pacing now, her earlier guilt transforming into fierce determination. Mom, we need to figure out who's doing this. Think about it. Who knows enough about our family to pull this off? Who has access to information about your routines, your medical history, even details about Marcus and me? I'd been wondering the same thing for weeks. It has to be someone I trusted with personal information. Someone I talked to regularly. The realization was dawning slowly, painfully. Someone who had reasons to document what I told them. Janet, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke up. Margaret, remember a few months ago when you were so excited about that volunteer calling to check on seniors? You said it was such a nice program, having someone to chat with regularly. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Those friendly weekly calls that had started in the spring. The volunteer who had been so interested in my family, my health, my daily routines, who had gradually shifted from asking about my well-being to expressing subtle concerns about my independence. The senior check-in program, I whispered. I told them everything. About Marcus worrying about me living alone, about Emma living far away, about my medication changes after my doctor's appointment, about forgetting appointments sometimes. Marcus ran his hands through his hair. And they twisted all of that normal information into evidence that you were declining. But why would a volunteer do that? Emma asked, confusion clear in her voice. The social worker looked troubled. There have been cases of individuals infiltrating legitimate programs to identify vulnerable seniors for various schemes. Sometimes it's financial exploitation. Sometimes it's more complex. People who get satisfaction from creating chaos or crisis situations. I felt violated in a way I hadn't expected. Those conversations had been a bright spot in my week. I'd looked forward to sharing stories about my children, talking about my garden, discussing my small daily challenges and victories. The person on the other end had seemed genuinely caring, genuinely interested in my well-being. I feel so foolish, I admitted, sinking deeper into my chair. No, Janet said firmly. You were being human. You were reaching out and making connections, which is exactly what healthy people do. Someone took advantage of your trust and twisted it into something ugly. Emma sat beside me and took my hand. Mom, this isn't your fault, but we need to make sure it stops, and we need to make sure you're protected. The social worker was making notes. We'll need you to provide us with all the information you have about this volunteer program. Phone numbers, names, when the calls started, everything you can remember. We'll coordinate with law enforcement and with the legitimate program if it exists. What happens now? Marcus asked. I mean, with all the reports that have been filed about Mom? We'll be documenting that the reports appear to be part of a harassment campaign. The evidence of your mother's competence and independence is clear. But Mrs. Patterson, you should be aware that this person may escalate their efforts when they realize their tactics aren't working. The thought sent a chill through me. If someone was willing to impersonate my children and manipulate social services, what else might they be capable of? Emma seemed to be thinking along the same lines. Should Mom stay with one of us for a while? Just until this gets resolved? Before I could object, Marcus nodded. You could come stay at my place, Mom. I have the guest room set up. I appreciated their concern, but the irony wasn't lost on me. You realize that's exactly what this person wanted? To convince everyone that I can't live independently? Janet leaned forward. But there's a difference between temporarily adjusting your living situation for safety reasons and being forced out because people think you're incompetent. The social worker was packing up her materials. That's entirely your choice, Mrs. Patterson. But I would recommend taking some precautions. Change your phone number. Be cautious about who you share personal information with, and document everything. Every suspicious call, every unusual incident. As the social workers prepared to leave, the phone rang again. We all froze, staring at it. Should I answer it? I asked. The social worker nodded. Put it on speaker if you can. I picked up the phone with shaking hands. Hello? Mrs. Patterson? This is Dr. Morrison's office. We need to speak with your son, Marcus, immediately about your medication compliance issues. Marcus stepped forward. This is Marcus. What medication issues? There was a pause. We received a call from someone identifying themselves as your mother's primary caregiver, reporting that she's been refusing to take her prescribed medications and has become confused and agitated. That's completely false, Marcus said firmly. And I'm not my mother's caregiver. She's perfectly capable of managing her own medications. Another pause, longer this time. Then the line went dead. The social worker looked at her colleague with raised eyebrows. They're getting desperate. After everyone left, we sat in my living room in stunned silence. The house felt different now, as if knowing someone had been watching and manipulating from the shadows had changed its very atmosphere. Mom, you can't stay here alone tonight, Marcus said, breaking the quiet. Not after what just happened. He's right, Emma added, moving to sit beside me on the couch. This person knows where you live, has your phone number, and clearly has been watching your routine. I looked around my familiar space, the home I'd lived in for 30 years. I hate that someone is making me feel unsafe in my own house. It's just temporary, Emma said gently, until we figure out who's doing this and why. Marcus was already on his feet. Let me pack you a bag. What do you need for a few days? As he headed toward my bedroom, Emma and I sat together processing everything that had happened. Do you have any idea who might be behind this? She asked. I'd been turning that question over in my mind for hours. I keep thinking about people I might have had conflicts with, but I can't come up with anyone who would go this far. What about someone who might benefit from you being declared incompetent? Emma asked carefully. The implication hung in the air. You mean someone who might want my house or my money? I shook my head. Emma, I don't have enough of either to make it worth this kind of elaborate scheme. Marcus returned with a small suitcase. I grabbed your medications, some clothes, and your important documents. We should take those with us, just to be safe. As I looked around the house one more time before leaving, Emma put her hand on my shoulder. We're going to figure this out, and we're going to make sure whoever is doing this faces consequences. The drive to Marcus's house gave me time to think about how much my world had shifted in just one afternoon. This morning, I'd been worried about a nosy social worker. Now, I was fleeing my own home because someone was systematically trying to destroy my independence. The thing that bothers me most, I said as Marcus pulled into his driveway, is how well they knew our family dynamics. They knew you and Emma well enough to impersonate you convincingly. Marcus turned off the engine, but didn't get out immediately. That's what's scary. This feels personal. Over the next few days, staying at Marcus's house, we worked together to unravel the mystery. Emma came over each evening after work, and we'd go through everything we could remember about suspicious calls or encounters. It was Emma who finally had the breakthrough. Mom, remember you mentioned getting wrong number calls a few weeks ago? What if those weren't wrong numbers? What do you mean? What if someone was calling to verify when you were home, to learn your schedule and your voice? The pieces started falling into place. The calls asking for people I didn't know. The hang-ups when I said they had the wrong number. Someone had been studying me. But how would they know enough about Marcus and me to pretend to be us? Emma wondered. Marcus looked up from his laptop where he'd been researching identity theft. Social media. Mom, do you remember posting about us on any online forums or community groups? I thought back to the Senior Center's Facebook page where I sometimes commented. I might have mentioned you both when people were talking about their children. That could be enough, Marcus said. Someone could have been collecting information from multiple sources. Emma was quiet for a moment. There's something else we should consider. What if this person has done this before? To other elderly people in the area? The thought was chilling, but made sense. You mean this could be some kind of pattern? Think about it, Emma continued. They knew exactly which agencies to call, what to say to sound credible. This feels practiced. That evening, as we sat around Marcus's dinner table, I realized something had shifted in our family dynamic. For years, I'd been so focused on maintaining my independence that I'd sometimes pushed away their offers of help. But this experience had shown me the difference between accepting support and losing autonomy. I want to thank you both, I said. Not just for helping me through this, but for believing me, for not doubting my competence even when officials were questioning it. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Mom, we've always known how capable you are. If anything, sometimes I worry you're too independent. Emma laughed. Remember when you insisted on climbing up to clean your own gutters last fall? At 72? I still think I could have managed it, I said, smiling for the first time in days. But as the evening wore on, the reality of our situation settled back over us. Someone was still out there, and we still didn't know who or why. It was Marcus who suggested our next step. Maybe it's time to go on the offensive, instead of just reacting. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, maybe we set a trap.